The shuttle doors hissed shut with a finality that echoed in the sudden silence. Senior Instructor Vrill's voice, still crackling over the external speakers, was designed to be devoid of emotion. Trainees, this is your final assessment. Class 3, Lethal World, designated Kryl. The atmosphere is breathable. The flora and fauna are not. Your objective is survival for 7 cycles. Extraction beacons will activate upon successful completion. Good luck. You will need it. Inside the cramped, descending craft, the words landed like physical blows. A Class 3 world. The classification was a galaxy-wide standard. Class 1, idyllic. Class 2, habitable with minor precautions. Class 3, lethal. A death sentence for the unprepared. It meant an environment where the local biology had evolved to view off-world protein as a delicacy. It meant atmospheric anomalies, predatory megafauna, and pathogens that could dissolve a lung in hours. The trainees, a mix of 12 of the galaxy's most promising young minds from a dozen different species, looked at each other, their multifaceted eyes and sensitive nostrils conveying a terror their translators didn't need to voice. They were the best of their generations, prodigies in xenobiology, survival tactics, and combat theory. And they had just been abandoned on a planet designed to kill them. All except one. Leo, a human male from a backwater planet called Earth, was peering out the small viewport. His posture was relaxed, almost bored. He wore the same standard-issue survival suit as the others, but it looked less like armor and more like comfortable loungewear on him. As the shuttle banked away and vanished into the bruised-looking sky, leaving them in a clearing surrounded by towering crimson-veined flora that pulsed with a faint, internal light, the others began to panic. A Xylosian, whose skin could change color to reflect his mood, shifted through a frantic spectrum of oranges and reds. "The atmospheric particulates! My scanner shows a 14% concentration of sporous allergens. My breathing lanes will constrict in 3 of your standard hours." A Cerebraton, whose large fur-covered head housed a brain of legendary processing power, was already running calculations. Predator attack probability within the first local night is 97.8%. Defensive position acquisition is paramount. I recommend the rock formation with the narrow approach vector 2.3 clicks northeast. A Frillopod, whose 4 legs were trembling, extended her sensory stalks high into the air, only to retract them with a sharp whistle of alarm. "The ground itself is wrong. The mycelial network beneath us is agitated. It is aware of our presence." Leo, who had been quietly examining a fern-like plant with leaves that slowly curled away from his touch, finally spoke. "Relax," he said, his voice calm and even. It's not that bad. Smells like a park back home after a rainstorm. Kinda nice, actually." 12 sets of alien eyes, representing a combined IQ in the stratosphere, swiveled to stare at him. "Not that bad?" the Xylosian wheezed, his colors flashing a disbelieving cyan. "My respiratory system is under siege. We are standing on a living organism that wishes to consume us, and everything with more than 4 legs here sees us as a high-protein snack. How is this not that bad?" Leo shrugged. A gesture so uniquely human, it was often misinterpreted. "Back home we have bears. Big, furry, lots of teeth. They'll mess you up if you're stupid. You just gotta make noise, don't startle them, and hang your food in a tree. This place?" He gestured vaguely at the pulsing forest. "It's just the woods. A bit exotic, maybe. Like a spring holiday camping trip." The Cerebraton processed this. Camping. A primitive recreational activity involving voluntary exposure to the elements. "And your species engages in this for fun?" "Sure," Leo said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. He knelt and scooped up a handful of dark, loamy soil. He let it run through his fingers, then sniffed it. "Good soil. Might be able to find some tubers or roots. And look," He pointed to the plant he'd been examining. The leaves curl away from touch. It's a defense mechanism, not an attack. It's probably full of water. To the horror of the frillipod, you who had deep empathy with plant life, Leo snapped off a thick, succulent leaf. A clear, cool liquid dripped from the broken end. He sniffed it cautiously, then touched a tiny drop to his tongue. He waited. After a moment, he grinned. Hydration, people. Tastes a bit like celery. No immediate toxic reaction. See? The planet's not trying to kill us. It's just existing. The others watched, aghast, as he took a small sip. The Cerebraton frantically scanned him. Vitals stable. No cellular degradation, no allergic response. It looked from its scanner to Leo and back again. How? That first night proved the Cerebraton's predator probability correct. As the alien sun, a cool purple dwarf star, dipped below the horizon, the forest came alive with new sounds, chittering, howling, and the heavy thud of something large moving through the undergrowth. The group had huddled in the rocky crevice the Cerebraton had suggested. And the frillipod was in a state of near catatonic fear, her stalks retracted completely. The Xylosian's breathing was a constant, labored rasp, despite a filter he'd rigged from his suit. The Cerebraton was twitching, overwhelmed by the sheer volume of sensory data. Leo, however, was busy. He had gathered a pile of dry, fibrous material from the base of the strange trees and some of the phosphorescent rocks that littered the clearing. While the others whispered frantically about defense perimeters, then he was patiently striking two of the rocks together. A spark flew. Then another. On the third try, a small flame caught on the fibrous tinder. He gently blew on it, and within minutes, a small, cheerful campfire was crackling in the mouth of their crevice. "What are you doing?" the Xylosian hissed, his colors a pattern of terror. "You'll attract every predator for 100 clicks." Leo fed another piece of glowing wood into the fire. "That's the idea," he said calmly. "Boys, predators see this," he pointed to the fire, "and most of them think danger. It's a universal constant. Fire means pain. It's an old signal." As if to prove his point, the heavy footfalls they'd been hearing stopped. A pair of luminous compound eyes reflected the firelight from the edge of the tree line for a long moment before blinking out. The creature moved away. The silence that followed was broken only by the crackle of the flames. The Cerebraton stared into the fire, its mind struggling to recalibrate. It had calculated predator attacks based on stealth and concealment. It had not factored in a creature that would simply build a sun. "The smoke," the Cerebraton said slowly, "is also acting as a deterrent. It is masking our scent and creating an irritant in the immediate airspace. The heat signature, it confuses their infrared senses." It looked at Leo with something akin to awe. "You have done this before." "Couple of times," Leo admitted with a shrug. Boy Scouts, camping with my dad. You learn a few things." He pulled a long, straight branch from his pack and began to whittle the end into a sharp point with a small knife. "Tomorrow we'll need to set some snares. Get some real food. Those ration bars are terrible." The next 6 days were a masterclass in survival, taught by a student who didn't even realize he was the teacher. When a Xylosian's respiratory issues worsened, Leo didn't rely on the medical kit, and he chewed up a wad of a particular bitter leaf he'd found, one that had a waxy coating that repelled local insects, and told the Xylosian to smear the pulp inside his breathing mask. The natural expectorant cleared his lanes within an hour. "Grandma's recipe for a chest cold," he explained. "Close enough." When a pack of sleek six-legged predators with serrated mandibles tried to encircle them on the second day, and the Cerebraton immediately began calculating optimal escape routes and which of them was statistically the slowest, the frillopod. Leo, however, just picked up a heavy rock and threw it with surprising accuracy, hitting the alpha predator square in the side of its head. It yelped and scurried back, confused. The human's companions are supposed to run. They are not supposed to throw rocks. "Get out of here!" Leo shouted, waving his arms and advancing on the stunned creatures. "Shoo! Go on!" The predators, confronted with a loud, aggressive, two-legged creature that did not behave like prey, broke and fled. The universal language of a bully being stood up to. He showed the Frillopod how to identify the trees that housed the grubs she found so repulsive, pointing out that they were 40% protein and, when roasted over the fire, tasted a bit like bacon, if you squint. The Frillopod, after a day of near starvation, tried one, and then another. She declared it acceptable sustenance. He taught the Cerebraton to stop analyzing and start observing. "Don't calculate the probability of rain," he said as the sky turned a bruised purple. "Look at the clouds. Smell the air. Feel how the pressure changes. The planet tells you what it's going to do. You just have to listen." Minutes before a torrential downpour of mildly acidic rain began, Leo had them all huddled under a massive, overhanging fungal cap he'd identified as a perfect natural shelter. By the 5th day, the group dynamic had shifted. The paralyzing fear was gone. In its place was a cautious, burgeoning competence. The Xylosian, his breathing now clear, had become an expert at finding the water-rich, succulent leaves. The Cerebraton no longer just calculated, but observed, noticing subtle changes in animal behavior that indicated the approach of larger predators, giving them ample time to avoid them. And the Frillopod, her empathy for the planet now an asset, could sense which areas of the mycelial network were calm and which were angry, steering them clear of the more aggressive groves of carnivorous flora. They had built a semi-permanent camp near a clean stream. They had a stockpile of roasted grub meat and firewood. They had even fashioned crude but effective tools and water containers from hollowed-out gourds. They were surviving. No, they were thriving. And they owed it all to the human who had casually labeled their death world just a spring holiday. On the 7th and final morning, a sleek, automated extraction shuttle descended silently into their clearing. The door hissed open. Inside, Instructor Vril stood, his rigid posture and expressionless face a mask of professional detachment, ready to observe the fruits of his brutal lesson. He expected to see hollow-eyed, traumatized survivors clinging to life. And he had his debriefing speech prepared, a lecture on their failures, on the true terror of the galaxy. Instead, he was greeted by a scene of domestic tranquility that short-circuited his higher brain functions. A small, tidy camp was nestled by the stream. The Frillopod was humming softly to herself as she carefully collected dew from the giant carnivorous flowers they now knew only reacted to fast movements. The Cerebraton was seated on a rock, not running calculations, but sketching a surprisingly accurate map of the local area in the dirt with a stick. The Xylosian, his colors a placid, contented blue, was tending to a small rack of thinly sliced, smoked meat over the dying embers of a campfire. And the human, Leo, was lounging against a sun-warmed rock, a piece of dried meat hanging from his mouth, looking for all the galaxy like a tourist waiting for a bus. He was reading from a small, battered notebook he'd had in his pack, a dog-eared collection of Earth poetry. Vril's mandibles clacked weakly. "Trainees, report." The Cerebraton looked up from his map, his voice calm and analytical. "Instructor, the local fauna is remarkably predictable once you understand its behavioral patterns. The apex predator, a Vexus stalker, has a territory of approximately 40 square clicks. We have found it easily avoids the area if we maintain a fire and are not actively hunting. The grubs from the barca tree are an adequate protein source. The biggest challenge was the mildly acidic precipitation, but we have identified suitable shelters." The Xylosian chimed in, his breathing strong. "My respiratory condition has completely cleared." A topical application of Viridian spatula leaf pulp proved more effective than the standard-issue bronchial stabilizers. I will be including it in my report on xenobotanical pharmacology. The frillopod extended her stalks in a gesture of greeting. The planet is not malicious, instructor. It is simply alive. We have learned to listen to it. She gestured with a stalk towards Leo. He taught us how. Instructor Vril stared at Leo, who had finally put his book down and stretched with a lazy, satisfied groan. He looked healthier, more relaxed, and infinitely more confident than he had a week ago. And the Class 3 lethal world had done to this human what a spa resort might do for others. Trainee, Vril finally managed, his voice stripped of all its usual intimidating authority. Explain. Your psychological profile indicated a relaxed disposition. But this is beyond relaxation. You treated a Class 3 environment as if it were a recreational outing. Leo stood up, dusted himself off, and walked towards the shuttle. He glanced back at the forest, a faint, nostalgic smile on his face. It's all about perspective, sir. You see a Class 3 lethal world. I see woods, a little wild, a little untamed, but not out to get you. You just have to be prepared, be observant, and not panic. It's like my grandfather used to say, there's no such thing as bad weather, just the wrong clothes. We just had to figure out what clothes this planet wanted us to wear. He walked past the stunned instructor and into the shuttle, finding a seat and immediately closing his eyes for a nap. The other trainees followed, pausing to give Vril a look that was a complex mixture of pity and pride. They had passed the test. But more than that, they had learned a lesson no classroom could ever teach, that the universe wasn't just a place of cold, hard calculations and lethal probabilities. Sometimes it was just a place you needed to know how to camp. The shuttle door closed, leaving Instructor Vril alone on the ramp for a long moment, staring at the quiet, the pulsing forest that a human had casually tamed with nothing more than a pocket knife, some common sense, and a lifetime of spring holidays.